Okay, everybody. So good morning. I'm joined this morning by Elisa Barrett, who is our Head of Improvement, Innovation and Research. I got that right, didn't I, Lisa? Good. Within the Trust. And as well as that, Lisa's also one of our Trust coaches and a really positive advocate for quality conversations within the organisation. So it sounds like you've got plenty to keep you busy.
Busy enough.
Enough. I like that. I like that. So Lisa recently introduced me to the idea of thinking pairs, which really, I found that really interesting, and I thought it might be useful to share with colleagues, because what we're hearing is that people are so busy, so stretched, so many different demands being placed on them, that I thought this might be worth sharing. So Lisa, can you share the basic principle, please, of a thinking pair? What is it?
Okay, cool. So I came across this idea when I was reading a book by a researcher called Nancy Klein, and she really tries to consider how we create great environments to have really productive conversations. And as part of that, that's about how do we develop our own thinking. And when we want to think, the partner to that is how we create places where we really listen to our colleagues.
Yeah.
So you may have had conversations where you're listening to what's being said, but you're also got this your own narrative running in your head. Oh, I'm going to say this next. Oh, what they mean by that is this, or that relates to me. I remember when. And what Nancy really tries to encourage us to do is to stop and to really listen, and to listen without interruption. And that's not as easy as it sounds. So it's about a promise to really, really listen to the person you're in conversation with. And it's about listening to what's being said, not about what we're thinking or what we're going to say next. And by doing that, you really do start to develop better relationships. You create space for people to develop their own thinking. And as a result of that, you come up with kind of better solutions to your challenges or issues.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So tell me the practicalities of it then. So how does it work? How do you go about setting one of these up?
Sure. So it's 30 minutes in total. I do this with a colleague. In fact, Linda and I, we've just started to try a listening pair, and we just do it once a month. So you identify 30 minutes. The first 5 minutes are the hello and landing and connecting and checking your IT and all of that. Then what happens is you have 10 minutes where one person speaks uninterrupted, and the listener acknowledges that they're listening through body language, eye contact, but we do not speak. So it is 10 minutes pure listening. After that 10 minutes, you switch roles, and the other person will share what they want to talk about, whilst the second person listens again without interruption. And at the end, there's 5 minutes where we just reflect as the listeners on a quality that we've noticed about that individual. And then you stop, and that's the end of it. So 30 minutes. The key questions that we use to kick off that conversation are, what do you want to think about? And what are your thoughts? And that's the opening question. And then you get 10 minutes to talk uninterrupted. When we think the person has come to the end of their sharing, the listener will just come in with one more question, which is, what more do you think or feel or want to say? And that is just to check, has that person really finished, or is there still some thinking going on? But other than those two questions, that is all the listener will say. And that's the structure of it. But I think what you realise by doing that is it is very, very rare to get 10 minutes of uninterrupted listening. And actually 10 minutes doesn't seem very long, does it? But we just do not get that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's obviously one of the key benefits, is just to be heard, and just having that space to say things out loud. But what other benefits do you see from doing this?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. There's some evidence that we only allow people 11 seconds before we interrupt them. And we just kind of accept that and go about that as being our general way that we have conversations. That seems crazy. But by not interrupting, you create space for the person to develop their own thinking. And we often just really do not get that time. We're super busy. We're rushing from one thing to the next. We never diary thinking time. So it is space to think and develop your own thoughts, which is incredibly important. It's not actually a conversation, but it's a really rare kind of listening. So it's different. And as well as giving somebody space to think, as a result of that, you often create better solutions to whatever it is that is in the back of your mind that is playing on your mind over time. And I think that's incredibly helpful. And also those 10 minutes of uninterrupted listening give you new insight into something that you've been mulling over but not giving yourself the chance to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting having tried it with you. It's interesting to watch the process. I also guess what I quite like about it is there's no pressure for you to do anything with what the person is telling you. You're just there to hear it and to listen to it. So it's not that you're then taking on that burden. What you're doing is watching them think their way through it.
Yeah.
Which is really quite interesting to watch someone's thinking process. So I guess, knowing how busy everybody is and how much everybody's got going on, what might you say to a colleague who says, gosh, I've just not got time to do that, or
Sure.
Once I start talking, I'm never going to stop. What would you say?
Yeah. So if you can create that half an hour, I'd really encourage you to try it once, just so you can make a decision then about, is this helpful to you or not? If you can't do that, then the principles of this you can take into any conversation, at home, at work, one-to-ones, appraisals, conversations that are just very natural and happening. So I would ask people to firstly just notice when you do interrupt, because I think people will be shocked by how often we do that. So first, just notice. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just notice, God, I came in there way too soon. I chopped them off mid-sentence. So just notice that. And then try to see if you can stop it. So next time you go to take that breath to come in, just pause and just see where their conversation goes to without you interrupting them. You may find that your assumption about what they were thinking was wrong, so you'll have a better quality conversation. Or you may learn something new so that you can then give them better insight, advice or guidance. So we're going to notice when we do interrupt. That's okay, just notice. We're going to then try to stop that interruption and just play with that and see what happens as a result of that. And just really work on, are you truly listening to what's being said, or are you planning what you're going to say? And also just to play with silence in conversation, because often for the other person it isn't silent. They're thinking, they're processing, and people need that time. And also I would say just really start to look so that you notice when somebody is thinking. People will divert their eyes, they might look up, they might turn their head away, and that is all signs that they are busy. They are thinking, and the gift you give them at that moment is space to do that, rather than fill in the silence or interrupting. So a bit of play with noticing first, and then adapting how you hold your conversations with people.
Yeah, and that's a great tip about watching where the person's looking. Because as you say, when their gaze is diverted, it's because they're doing the work. And I guess the other interesting thing is that for you it might feel like the silence is eternal, but they won't notice that because they're working, they're busy in their heads, and it'll seem like seconds to them. So it's just holding.
We hear that a lot. We hear that a lot, don't we? And I just interrupted you. So I've not got this. I'm still playing and still developing this skill. But I think what can be helpful with that, because many people talk about how difficult it is to be okay in silence. So if you've really tried to hold the silence, maybe at the end of the conversation, ask for a bit of feedback. Say, gosh, there was a really long silence in there. Did you notice it? Because the chances are they're going to turn around to you and go, I didn't notice any silence, because they were busy. And maybe getting some of that feedback will give you confidence to try it again the next time, knowing that the other person is busy in that moment, even though for you it feels like an eternity.
Yeah, fantastic. So to review then, a thinking pair is 30 minutes out of your day for you and one other person to sit and just be able to download and think uninterrupted and be heard, and then have a reflection on what the other person perhaps observed or noticed you were doing in your 10 minutes. And actually, although 10 minutes doesn't sound like a long time when you're talking uninterrupted, it can feel like quite a big space for thinking. So it's definitely worth trying. But where else might you direct colleagues who feel like they're needing some support, who might be reaching a point of overwhelm or just,
Sure.
struggling?
Well, I think, in relation to the listening pairs, then I know you and I are both happy to explain it in more detail to anybody, so please just connect with us. In terms of more broader issues, then certainly my point of contact is always peers to share, the wellbeing team, our coaching network, and line managers, those kind of people. I think the key information is, if you feel like that, I think it's to share that burden to get some support. So they're certainly things that I would do personally.
Fantastic. So in the true spirit of a thinking pair then, Lisa, is there anything else you'd like to think about or you'd like to say?
So I think my parting word is to challenge, really, to say to people, I challenge you tomorrow not to interrupt. And I challenge you to just notice how often you might do that. And then maybe the next day, just try not to interrupt quite so much, and just see what that does for your conversation.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time, Lisa. That's been great.
Pleasure. Thank you.